Cyan Laser, Silver becomes a beam of light. Absorb a Cyan Wisp's hyper go-on, and his entire body compresses into a small, glowing cyan projectile, trailing a stream of transparent cubes as it rockets forward. This isn't a boost, it's a total physical conversion, and while it lasts, the Cyan Laser is stated to move at speeds equal to the speed of light. Aiming happens first. A thin dashed line traces out the first stretch of his intended path while he lines up the shot, but once he actually fires, that control disappears entirely. Silver has no control over his path once he fires. The direction is locked the moment he commits, and from there, he ricochets off every wall, floor, and ceiling he touches, bouncing at perfect geometric angles like a real laser off a mirror, crossed through glass or a prism mid-flight, and he gets redirected clean through it, or funneled down a cable as a raw stream of destructive energy. Anything caught in that path is destroyed instantly. This power didn't originate with Silver. It debuted in 2010 with the Cyan Wisps of Sonic colors, small aliens with a pair of permanently narrowed orange eyes and 3 lightning bolt-shaped tentacles, described in-game as fast, chatty, and a little scatterbrained, unable to sit still even by Wisp standards. Sonic freed the first of them in the tropical resort zone, and the Cyan Laser went on to reappear years later in both Sonic Generations and Sonic Lost World, granted to modern Sonic in near-identical form, before the entire power set was carried forward again in 2021 with the release of Sonic Colors Ultimate, a full remaster that reintroduced the Cyan Laser to a generation of players who'd never touched the original Wii release. It even crossed into Archie Comics, where Sonic absorbed a Cyan Wisp during the Sonic Colors arc in issue 219 of the ongoing series, surrounding himself with the same floating cyan cubes and trailing energy seen in the games, and even generating a small electric field strong enough to damage certain bosses on reverting back to normal. When Silver picked up the same power years later in his own mobile spin-off, he inherited every one of those rules along with it. The same bounce physics, the same prism redirection, the same light speed burst. In the Wii version of Sonic Colors, players first unlock the ability to use it in Tropical Resort's third act, and the Cyan Wisps that grant it show up again in Sonic Runners themselves in a smaller, infantile design, a visual cue that the wild, erratic energy behind the Cyan Laser starts young and never really calms down. And here's the catch built into the very thing that makes it so devastating. The Cyan Laser burns through its hyper go-on faster than almost any other color power in the entire Wisp roster. A few seconds and it's over, unless he crosses paths with another Cyan Wisp mid-flight to refuel it, fast, blind, and short-lived, a weapon Silver can point but never steer. Yellow Drill. Where the Cyan Laser goes fast and reckless, the Yellow Drill goes down. Absorbing a yellow wisp turns Silver into a spinning yellow cone, his whole body collapsing into a giant version of his own head, and with it comes the ability to tunnel through soft earth or cut through water like a torpedo. Underground, this power isn't just faster, it's the only way through. Certain hidden paths in Wisp-powered stages simply don't exist unless the user bores straight into the dirt and follows them down, uncovering items and shortcuts no other form can reach. Underwater, the same transformation turns him into something closer to a torpedo, cutting through currents no amount of ordinary swimming could match, and even helping him breathe more easily while submerged. This, too, is borrowed technology. The Yellow Wisps first appeared in Sonic Colors as a triangular-headed breed with a single orange eye and yellow and tangerine stripes down their bodies, drawn instinctively toward earth and water, and granting Sonic the exact same drilling power Silver would later use in Sonic Runners. The form proved durable enough to resurface in Sonic Lost World in the 2021 remaster Sonic Colors Ultimate, and much later in the Racer Sonic Racing Crossworlds decades after its debut, and like the Cyan Wisps, the Yellow Wisps show up in Sonic Runners in a smaller, infantile form before they ever hand their power over. Players can even push the drill to move faster while it's active, though doing so only burns through the Wisp gauge that much quicker, trading a longer run for a shorter one. Sega even built an entire weapon around the same Yellow Wisp energy, the Drill Wispin, a cone-shaped tool that lets a player-created avatar pierce through enemies and climb walls using borrowed Yellow Wisp cooperation, proof that the underlying power was strong enough to be repurposed as gear, rather than just a temporary transformation. And here's the exception that makes the drill dangerous instead of convenient: it can only cut through soft ground. hits solid stone or a hard surface, and the drill ricochets off course entirely, wasting precious seconds of wisp gauge that don't come back. Worse, if that gauge runs dry while he's still buried underground, there's no warning shot, no stumble back up to the surface. The run simply ends there. The same power that lets Silver punch through mountains can just as easily bury him in one. Indigo Asteroid. This is where Silver stops being a projectile and starts being a planet. Absorbing an indigo wisp collapses his body into a small, dense orb wrapped in striped indigo skin, his eyes losing their pupils and turning yellow, a wide lavender ring encircling his equator like Saturn's. This power is younger than the other two. It debuted in 2013 in Sonic Lost World, the only new color power in that game to appear on both the Wii U and 3DS versions, granted by a breed of wisp with a single violet eye and a ring of its own circling its spherical head, described as halcyon, social, and energetic despite the sheer destructive force locked inside them. By the time it reached Silver's hands in Sonic Runners, it had already been proven across stages like Windy Hill, Desert Ruins, and Lava Mountain, controlled either by equipping it before a run or by picking it up mid-stage from an item box with a simple screen tap letting the user hold the resulting orb steady in mid-air. It stuck around long enough to reappear years later as a dedicated weapon, the Asteroid Wispon, wielded by the mercenaries Rough and Tumble in the IDW comic run. The same gravitational power that once turned Silver into a planet later got bolted onto a gun. And that lavender ring isn't decoration. As the Indigo Asteroid, Silver generates a gravitational pull strong enough to tear apart scenery and shred Eggman's robots into voxel-sized debris, pulling the wreckage into orbit around himself. Here's where it gets interesting. That debris doesn't just orbit for show. Silver can burn it as fuel, using the mass he's already consumed to strengthen the pull even further, reaching objects that were too far away a second ago. It's a form that gets hungrier and more dangerous the longer it feeds. Compare that to the Violet Void, a near-identical power introduced earlier in the Nintendo DS version of Sonic Colors. Same basic idea, pull objects in, grow with each one collected, but the Violet Void obliterates everything it touches on contact. The Indigo Asteroid doesn't destroy what it swallows. It breaks the scenery down and carries the pieces with it. Same gravity, completely different appetite, but there's one hard rule this form can't break. Anything reinforced with its own elemental energy won't shatter under the pull. It hurts Silver instead. A miniature planet with real limits, still only as strong as what it's allowed to swallow. ESP Silver. Every form so far borrowed power from something outside Silver. This one comes from inside him. ESP Silver isn't a wisp, and it isn't the Chaos Emeralds. It's what happens when Silver stops holding back his own psychokinesis. The name itself is a bit of a mislabel and not a new one. Silver's signature attack in Sonic Rivals and its sequel was already called ESP, a psychic move performed by leaping into the air, hovering in place, pressing his hands to his forehead, and releasing waves of green psychokinetic energy to disorient rivals. Despite the name, Silver himself calls out psychic control when using it in Sonic Rivals 2, and he's never once demonstrated genuine extrasensory perception, the ability to see the past or future. When that same label got attached to his empowered Sonic Runner's form, the confusion carried over. Internally, the game's own files reportedly named his aura ESP Aura, and the label stuck to the character even though what he's actually doing is pure telekinesis turned all the way up, not clairvoyance. Visually, the difference from his base form is subtle. Same white fur, same gold eyes, same 5 spines flared forward across his head. What changes is the aura. A prominent, constant, psychokinetic glow surrounds him at all times, tinting his whole silhouette a deeper aqua, a visual cue that the Silver never lets his guard down. The story behind that glow matters. In-game descriptions place this version of Silver after his split from Blaze the Cat. Years spent training on his own and pushing his telekinetic limits past what fans saw in his 2006 debut. There's a wrinkle to that timeline worth noting. Some analysis of the game's lore suggests this ESP Silver actually hails from a branch of the future where Iblis was defeated but Solaris' flame was never fully extinguished, which would explain why he's alone, without Blaze, in a future that technically shouldn't still exist. Years later, when Sonic Speed Simulator brought the character back as a collectible, his own dialogue leaned into that same idea, describing himself as another Silver, pulled out of a timeline that no longer lines up with the one fans know, someone who still finds himself dwelling on a future full of flame and lava that the mainline story erased. Base Silver had already been a playable character in Sonic Runners for some time before this, running as a speed and easy type. ESP Silver arrived on November 27, 2015, not as a new addition to the roster, but as a re-release of that same character, repackaged as a Fly-in Future type variant built around a completely different set of strengths. The only time in the game's run that an existing character was ever given a second, alternate version of themselves. In gameplay terms, ESP Silver was significant enough to define an entire mechanic around him. He was the character who introduced the Future type, the very last character type added to the mobile game that housed him, trading 5% of movement speed for a 37% score bonus. Stack that with his fly-type float ability, letting him hover through mid-air on demand, and he was built to be one of the most mechanically loaded characters the game ever released. He also wasn't unique in being a transformation at all. Of every playable skin in that entire Mobile Runners roster, only 2 were built as genuine transformations of an existing character rather than a new one entirely. ESP Silver was one. The Werehog was the other, Sonic's own nighttime transformation from Sonic Unleashed, where he stretches into a hulking, elastic-limbed brawler. 2 very different characters, 2 very different power sets, but the same distinction in Sonic Runners files. Everyone else on the roster was a new face. These 2 were the same hero, pushed further than before. That game itself didn't last. Sonic Runners soft launched in select regions in February of 2015, went fully live that June, and Sega pulled the plug entirely by July of 2016, undone by pop-up ads, pay-to-play mechanics, and technical issues that critics hammered even as they praised its gameplay variety, meaning ESP Silver only got to exist inside his original game for about 8 months before it was gone, despite the game having topped 6 million downloads within its first year on the market. Sonic Runners' place in the wider story was always a little shaky anyway. The game leaned specifically on the continuity of the handheld Sonic titles, going as far as referencing Mother Wisp, a character Sonic and Tails only ever actually met in the Nintendo DS version of Sonic Colors. He outlived it anyway, resurfacing in May of 2024 inside the Roblox game Sonic Speed Simulator as a super rarity tier skin, the 3rd character in that entire game to be placed on the same tier as Super Sonic himself, unlocked through a dedicated event called Overpowered Silver. No Chaos Emeralds, no alien creature lending him power, just Silver, finally strong enough to stop restraining himself. Hit the like and subscribe button to see more videos like this. Leave a comment on your favorite Silver transformation. Let's get back into the video. Super Silver. Everything else on this list is borrowed or unlocked. This is Silver at full output. Silver himself was built around psychokinesis from the start. Sonic Team designed the character specifically to make use of a new physics engine introduced for Sonic the Hedgehog, 2006, giving him the power to lift, throw, and hover over anything in his path long before he ever touched a Chaos Emerald. Super Silver is what happens when that same signature power gets plugged directly into the 7 emeralds at once. Gather all 7 Chaos Emeralds, and Silver's white fur ignites into a golden white, his chest fur darkening to gold, the cyan markings across his gloves and the hexagons on his shoes flashing over to yellow. His eyes turn red, his quills rise and float. This is the form Silver wore standing shoulder to shoulder with Super Sonic and Super Shadow against Solaris, a fused entity that could shrug off ordinary attacks entirely and had to be worn down by 3 super states working together just to crack its defenses. And here's the detail that separates Silver from the other 2 hedgehogs in that fight. Super Sonic and Super Shadow got their power the traditional way, drawing directly from the emeralds themselves. Silver didn't. He was granted his super state through an energy transfer from Super Sonic, making him the first hedgehog in the series to reach a super form without touching the emerald's power at its source. It shows in the numbers too. His super gauge starts the Solaris fight already full, the only one of the 3 with that head start built in. And he's the only character in that entire encounter capable of damaging Solaris before any of its shields are stripped away first. Flight without psychokinesis. Near invulnerability. Strength and speed on equal footing with Sonic and Shadow's own super forms. The boost to his psychokinesis unlocks entirely new moves too, chief among them the Shield of Light, a dome of telekinetic energy large enough to stop every incoming projectile within its radius at once, alongside a heightened ability to sense disturbances in reality itself, the same sense that fuels his entire mission across time. And yet, for all that power, there's a strange gap in his record. Outside of mobile spin-offs, Super Silver is the only hedgehog to ever reach a super transformation and never actually defeat an enemy entirely on his own. Every one of his mainline victories has come as part of a team effort, never a solo finish. Oddly, one thing stays exactly the same. Despite every marking on his gloves and shoes shifting from cyan to gold, Silver's actual psychokinesis remains its usual cyan color, even in this state. The one part of him the transformation doesn't touch. The form was significant enough to leave a mark beyond its own game, too. Years later, the Nintendo DS role-playing spin-off Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood indirectly referenced it with an in-game codex entry on the Chaos Emeralds noting that Sonic, Shadow, Knuckles, and a variety of other people have been known to use their power to reach these kinds of powered-up states. Silver counted among them, without ever appearing on screen. That single battle in 2006 wasn't the end of the form's story. It just kept resurfacing. In Archie Comics' long-running series, Silver picked up an entirely parallel history as a knight of Kronos in training under Mammoth Mogul, chasing down a supposed traitor from Sonic's freedom fighters across 200 years of time travel, first named across Sonic the Hedgehog issues 194 and 195. His super state followed him there too. Head writer Ian Flynn later confirmed that the comics quietly treat the events of Sonic 06 as having happened in that continuity as well, which means Silver's Archie counterpart earned the exact same golden transformation against the exact same enemy, even if the pages never spelled it out directly on panel. When the Super Genesis wave rewrote the comics continuity from the ground up, Super Silver survived the reset largely unchanged, carried forward into the rebuilt universe as the same Chaos Emerald-fueled super state it had always been, right down to the golden cuff rings and glowing palm symbols on his gloves. Even the base outfit underneath it traces back to the games. Silver's secret Freedom Fighter's uniform in the comics is modeled directly on his racing suit from Sonic Rivals 2, the same design later reused as the basis for his official Super Silver artwork on Sega's own Art Assets materials. The transformation's biggest modern spotlight came in IDW's comic run during the ARC fans and the writers alike call All or Nothing. Dr. Eggman's rogue employee, Starline, had unleashed a metal virus that was turning Sonic's entire world into robotic zombots, infecting Knuckles, Tails, and Amy one after another while Sonic himself fought off the same infection creeping through his own body. When Espio first suggested using Chaos Control to fix it, Silver shot the idea down himself, pointing out that Shadow was better suited to it and that the power only ever shifted a single target. Never rewrote events outright. Eggman instead settled on a different plan. Charge the unstable Warp Topaz with Supersonic's power and use it to warp the virus away in one motion. Starline protested that the artifact was too volatile to risk, and Eggman's answer was to have Metal Sonic strip the Warp Topaz from Starline's glove before firing him and shoving him through a portal to get him out of the way entirely. Cornered by a giant, virus-empowered Zavok and down to his last resources, Sonic snatched the final Chaos Emerald just before being overrun, and both he and Silver transformed together. Supersonic instantly purged of his own infection the moment the change took hold. Zavok didn't last long against them. Supersonic dropped him back to normal size in one rapid flurry of blows, so quick and so anticlimactic that Super Silver said as much out loud, only for Supersonic to reply that there wasn't time to be fancy. What followed was the real climax. Supersonic tasked Super Silver with a job no other super form in the franchise had ever been handed. Using an unstable artifact called the Warp Topaz, Supersonic cracked open a portal straight to the sun, while Super Silver used his own enhanced psychokinesis to physically rip the metal virus out of every infected body on the planet, down to the molecular level, and funnel it straight into that portal. The two of them circled the globe at super speed doing exactly that, purging an entire planet's infection in one continuous, unbroken sweep before the Warp Topaz's instability triggered one final explosion the moment Supersonic tried to discard it. Silver was thrown clear by the blast. Sonic himself vanished in it entirely, leaving Silver to explain to Tails, Knuckles, and Amy what had happened once the dust cleared. It's one of the only times in the franchise a super form has been used not to punch something, but to perform planet-scale surgery. The Warp Topaz itself didn't vanish in that blast either. It turned out to have teleported away intact, quietly resurfacing later inside one of Tails' labs, a loose thread from Super Silver's biggest moment that the story left dangling. By the next issue, Silver is shown returning to a future that's finally been restored because of what he and Sonic pulled off together. The form kept resurfacing in games that had nothing to do with Solaris or the Metal Virus at all. Sega added Super Silver to the mobile racer Sonic Forces Speed Battle as part of a limited time event tied to the franchise's 32nd anniversary, running for 1 week in August of 2023 and requiring 300 cards to fully unlock. True to the source material, he's built differently from most other characters in that game. Every racer's super form activation originally called for 50 collected rings, a direct nod to how the transformation works across the mainline games, but a later balance update pushed that threshold up to 80. Once triggered, the boost lasts 3.5 seconds at its first level and stretches to 7 seconds at higher levels, burning 4 rings every half second while it's active, and letting Silver barrel straight through obstacles and rival attacks that would otherwise slow him down. Even the jingle carries history with it. The Team Ultimate Silver theme that plays on activation is a remix cut of Dreams of an Absolution, the same piece of music that scored Silver's Sonic 06 storyline in the first place. The same golden form went on to appear in Sonic Dash, its sequel Sonic Dash Plus, and Sonic Prime Dash. In Sonic Speed Simulator, added as recently as December of 2025, the form works on its own dedicated timer, a super meter that drains for a full 3 minutes before forcing Silver back to whatever skin he had equipped beforehand, extended only by collecting more rings along the way. Even outside the transformation itself, Silver's connection to Chaos-adjacent power kept turning up in unexpected corners of the franchise. In Team Sonic Racing, he raced as a Technique-type driver on Team Vector alongside Vector the Crocodile and Blaze the Cat, which meant he had exclusive access to the Magenta Wisp's rhythm ability behind the wheel. And in interviews promoting the game, Silver himself named the Jade Wisp's Ghost ability as his personal favorite among the 14 available Wisp items, saying flatly that he doesn't care for the more cowardly ways of attacking an opponent and would rather just vanish and focus on the race. Across 2 decades, 3 separate comic continuities, and half a dozen mobile games, Super Silver is the one transformation on this list that never stopped finding new places to prove itself. Which of Silver's transformations do you think is the strongest? Drop it in the comments.